Welcome to Adobe Desk. My name is Brent, and today I'm going to be going over the Lasso tools in Photoshop Creative Cloud. Now, the Lasso tools are really useful for making selections that are a little bit more complicated than what you would need with the rectangular marquee tool. Marquee tool is great if you just want to grab a box or a rectangle. But if you want to get something with a little bit more detail, a little bit more refinement, you're going to need to use the lasso tools. Now the first lasso tool, which is just the lasso tool, it works kind of like drawing. So you just click and you just draw freehand and close the loop, and that'll be your selection box or your selection outline. Now with something like this, if we wanted to take this flower, cut it out around from the background, and delete the background and give it a new background, we would want to cut out the flower right along the edge here. Now you could do this theoretically with the lasso tool, but gotta be honest, it would be a huge headache to get all the way around doing it just like this. You would have tons of little mistakes that you would have to go back and correct. You might get through, but chances are you would just piss yourself off. So I don't recommend you use the lasso tool. The lasso tool for something like this, only total beginners use it. And if that's all you know how to use, that's fine. That's better than nothing. But advanced users don't use just the lasso tool for this. In fact, the only time we would use it is if we just wanted to make a very rough outline like this, or maybe get a little bit more refined. So we could do something like this, inverse, and delete it. Then with this much smaller background to deal with, we could use some other tools like the background removal tool or something, and just delete what's left. It would just help from having to brush out the entire background by cutting off the bulk of it. But we wouldn't even need to use that method in this case, because we have a couple other lasso tools that would make things a lot easier. And we're going to start with the magnetic lasso tool, okay? A lot of Photoshop tutorials don't explain this tool because they say it's a more advanced feature. I say BS. I say you should learn it right away. What it does is it looks for a contrast between two colors, a tonal contrast. In this case, it's looking at the orange and the green, and it's saying, man, that's a pretty sharp contrast. That must be what he's trying to trace around. So it simply puts the line, the selection outline, right along the edge of that. And I don't even have to click anything. It will do all of it for me, just so long as I'm generally getting or dragging my cursor along that border between the two colors. Now, I can click and add a point if I want. In fact, I'm going to start doing that right at the corners here, just so that we get a nice crisp cutout. Sometimes it'll try to round out some corners, which it's fine at the tip of the petals, but down there at the little crook in between the petals, I want it to be a nice sharp selection. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I can move a little bit faster. It's pretty good at finding exactly what edge you're trying to follow along. It's not perfect. I should point out that if you fling your cursor over the petal here, it's probably going to try and put a selection tab or a selection point inside the flower. So you don't want to just kind of go completely crazy here. You do want to drag right around corners. So yeah, there we go. So let's go ahead and do what I did before and get the inverse of the flower selected, delete it, and yeah, there you go. That's nearly perfect. That looks really good. As you can see up here, it kind of rounded out some of those dark corners that wasn't so much of an issue once I started clicking in them. The corners are still there, but a little bit lessened. Really not an issue at all if this flower is going to have another background which is a little bit complicated or a little bit darker. You really wouldn't need to fix these little dark corners at all. But if it's going to be, something this size against a white background, you may want to do a little bit more touch up. So one thing I should also point out is that these features up here on the magnetic lasso tool can alter how the outline looks. So I'm going to go ahead and hit undo and show you a couple of them. So the feather, now you may have noticed that when we did this cutout, the cutout looks almost cardboard, like a cardboard cutout. The contrast is pretty sharp, and that might be okay for a lot of things. But if you don't want that sharpness between the cutout and the new background, you can feather it, and what that'll do, it'll soften the edges a little bit, so that it looks a little bit more natural. Feathering really comes in handy with doing cutouts like this. Anti-aliasing, another wonderful thing. Always leave it checkmarked when you're doing things with rounded edges. It'll help soften the edges instead of making them so harsh. So always leave that on. Now, the only other one I'm going to talk about is the frequency. The frequency, as I was dragging, you would have noticed that every once in a while it would just naturally put a point down along the line. The higher the frequency, the more points you're going to get. So that's all you need to worry about with that. And then there's a whole lot of options under Refine Edge to further improve the edge of your selection with the Lasso tool. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is the Polygonal Lasso tool. Now this, you really wouldn't want to use this with anything like this flower image because of the rounded edges. In this case, the magnetic lasso tool works much better, but if you have an image like this, now the magnetic lasso tool will probably work just fine, especially finding those edges, right? And you can just click on the corners to make sure that it's sharp, but sometimes you may make a little bit of a mistake while dragging, and it might grab a selection like in there, and you go, oh dang it, that's not what I wanted. Now I'm gonna have to start over. Or instead of using the magnetic lasso tool with images with such sharp straight lines, use the polygonal tool. And here's what it looks like. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Click on that corner there. It's just gonna give you a nice straight line, right? So you can pretty much just connect the dots. Okay, I can't tell you how much easier an image like this will be to cut out when you just connect the dots. There's no guesswork, there's no mistakes. You just give it a second, find a nice point, be accurate, and you've got no problem at all getting a selection that's nice and sharp, right along the edges, right in the corners, no mistakes. And I'm going to hold, oh, there we go. All right, so there we go. I'm going to turn off that background layer, and then I'm going to hit the select inverse one more time, and there we go. We got a cutout of a cardboard box. So that's it for the Lasso tools. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you enjoyed this. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.